Good evening, everyone. Welcome here to Santa Clara. I'm Elaine Scott, Dean of the School of Engineering, and again, I welcome you here. It's my great pleasure to welcome the Association for Corporate Growth back to Santa Clara University. And it gives me special pleasure to welcome all of you to our new state of a home, the Dorado campus for discovery and innovation. I hope you get a chance to walk around the building and see our wonderful facilities here. This is our first time hosting the ACG in our new facility. It is 270,000 square feet. It's one of the largest STEM facilities in the country. It houses students and faculty for both engineering and the sciences. It was designed to encourage interdisciplinary growth, which the topic that we're talking about here is very interdisciplinary, so it's a very appropriate place for this. As you can see from our open spaces and glass-walled labs and classrooms, it's a place for faculty and students to collaborate, connect, and create across disciplines. I want to thank you for joining us tonight to our all-star panel to explore the advances in healthcare that BioWearables devices can bring to patient care. And now, where is she? The AGC CEO, Yvonne Schwab, will introduce our program. I will turn it over to Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I appreciate you having us here tonight. So welcome. Again, I'm Yvonne Schwab, I'm ACG Silicon Valley CEO. As many of you already know, ACG is the leading business-to-business networking organization in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. We are excited to welcome you here today to our panel discussion on BioWearables, sponsored by Santa Clara University Engineering Department. Before we get started though, I wanted to quickly tell you about a few more events we have left this year, including our public board circle on December 5th, as well as our holiday gathering on December 15th in Mountain View at ubiquitous. We invite you to join us to celebrate the holidays with our ACGSV community, with mulled wine, traditional German fare, and a little Christmas market. So mark your calendars, better yet buy your tickets. Bring your friends, your coworkers, your clients, your spouses. Everyone is welcome, the more the merrier. I also wanted to let you know that we will be having our Capital Outlook on January 19th next year, an annual tradition at BNY Mellon. Mark is right here. He'll be hosting us then in Menlo Park. So again, mark your calendars for that. That will be a very interesting discussion. And for more information on all of our events, please check our website at acgsv.org. Now for tonight, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Santa Clara University, one more time for hosting us here at the beautiful new Dorado campus. We really appreciate your partnership and your support. Now let's get started with our discussion. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Prashant Asuri, Director of Bioinnovation and Design Lab, as well as the Associate Professor of Bioengineering here at Santa Clara University. He will be our moderator today, so please enjoy the discussion, and here's Prashant.
So as I gather my notes, I want to make a quick observation. I always knew that you were students for life, but please don't take that literally. There's still student seats in the front area. Everything, I've been teaching for 11 years, and I can't believe that people still leave the front seats being open. They're not scary people. I've talked to all of them, and they seem to be friendly. We'll have a great discussion today. So thank you everyone for being here today. Good evening everyone. My name is Prashant Asuri. I'm an Associate Professor of Bioengineering at Santa Clara University. I also serve as the Director for the Healthcare Innovation Design Program. Sorry everyone, we made a name change from Bioinnovation to Healthcare Innovation, and we didn't inform you. And the Healthcare Innovation Design Program works with the industry to empower students to address complex challenges in healthcare. And today I'm excited to moderate this panel on BioWearables. We have a fantastic panel today, and I'm sure you will learn a lot and you'll be excited by the progress the field has made and what we hold for the future for BioWearables. As you all know, BioWearables can already help collect individualized data. Fitness trackers, smartwatches can collect sleep cycles, stress levels, heart rates. They can also track more sophisticated physiological parameters and provide doctors with real-time updates such that they are able to monitor their patients without being physically present. In principle, the metrics collected by BioWearables may also help improve adherence to treatment plans and identify those at risk of disease. In addition to tracking and diagnostics, it's also important to note that BioWearables can offer therapy. Rehabilitation devices, insulin pumps, smart prosthetics, they all fall into this category. And it's interesting how we can see some of these devices beginning to include biosensors. They can monitor patient attributes so they can adjust the therapy accordingly. Right? My own research and scholarship has not given me a lot of opportunities to work with BioWearables. The Healthcare Innovation Design Program has hosted a few projects related to this field. As an example, we've collaborated with the Jaipur Foot Organization in India and Santa University's Robotics Systems Lab to develop a low-cost electric upper limb prosthetic that's currently undergoing design refinements for usability testing and manufacturing, and we're hoping that this will be finished soon. In partnership with Quiet Mind Foundation, an interdisciplinary team under the guidance of Dr. Julia Scott is working on a non-invasive brain stimulation device that reads brain activity and stimulates the brain with near-infrared light that's been shown to improve the symptoms of Alzheimer's at early stage. But we're not here to talk about my work, we're here to learn from this fantastic panel. And with the help of the panel today, I'd like to explore what lies in the future for BioWearables and what customer segments may benefit from this field. We'll also explore the role of collaboration and convergence for the future success of BioWearables. And finally, how current students and early professionals may pick up the skills and experience to start a career in this field and then build longevity. Right? So please welcome me and please join me in welcoming Dr. Emre Arasi, Associate Professor of Bioengineering at Santa University and the co-founder of SmartLens. Alex Cook, Engineering Manager of Process Technologies at Netflix. Renee Ryan, Chief Executive Officer of CalHealth. And finally, Raja Sundaram, Chief Executive Officer of Fitbit. Let's please welcome our panelists with a round of applause. We'll start with a brief introduction of the panelists, and may I request each of you to introduce yourself to the audience, give them a sneak peek of your careers thus far, and paying particular attention to what your work has been in relation to BioWearables. Alex?
All right. Can you hear me just fine? Great. So I'm Alex Cook. I'm the Engineering Manager of Process Technologies at NextFlex. NextFlex, for those who aren't aware, which I'm guessing is 99% of you, is a manufacturing innovation institute dedicated to flexible hybrid electronics. So basically electronics where we have additive manufacturing combined with traditional silicon microprocessors to hopefully bridge the gap and get some of the best of both worlds. I got to be where I am kind of in an unusual path. I started as a physics PhD, went through Air Force Research Labs for a few years, and then came out here and doing a convincing impression of an engineer. Sometimes I confuse people enough that they think I'm an electrical engineer, actually. So, didn't do well in that regard. But I'm glad to be here with you all, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Hello everyone, my name is Emre Arasi. I'm an associate professor at the bioengineering department. My journey in wearables area started almost 10 years ago when I was a postdoctoral researcher working at Stanford on lab-on-a-chip devices. There was an ophthalmologist visiting professor at the time who came with the idea that or passion with basically measuring the intraocular pressure in inside the eye, the pressure inside the eye for glaucoma management. He came to us with this idea. So let's develop a device. So I got excited with it, and we developed an implantable device at the time, and it made a big splash, much bigger than any one of us anticipated. And then we decided to start a company being in Silicon Valley. So I mean at Stanford, right? That's imposed on you, yeah. So yeah, they'll beat you if you don't do it. Exactly.
That was me.
And we realized that implantable is not the way to go. Maybe actually another company was started in implantable, around implantable technology. We started working on a contact lens type of a device. I co-founded Smart Lens and worked on developing a wearable technology for measuring the intraocular pressure. Right now, Smart Lens is a clinical stage startup company. After 6 years, I mean, it takes a long time. I mean, I didn't imagine that it's going to take this much when we started. But I mean, I'm complete. I mean, Smart Lens has its own CEO right now. We're doing our own research on human-centric medical devices, medical wearables for rehabilitation management. Maybe I'll get a chance to talk more about it in the next questions. So this is basically my journey.
Renee Ryan, I'm currently the CEO of Cala Health. I started my career just a few decades ago in investment banking. I was an excellent student. That's all I knew that I could do. I was an economics major. I did graphs for a living. And so I went to an industry that I knew I could learn, and that was investment banking for me. And so my first transaction that I ever worked on as an investment banker was a financing for a biotechnology company. It was based in San Francisco, a boutique, small, focused investment bank. From there, I kept going in investment banking and ended up going to Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse and global firms. But the passion in my belly was about how do you get that breakthrough innovation to patients? And so an opportunity came up to go to J&J as an investor. So I was a venture investor. I actually ran around Stanford's campus a lot. And in fact, one day I met the founder and now chief scientific officer of Cala, which is doing a wearable neuromodulation therapy. So we do what deep brain stimulation does through a wristwatch-like form factor. And we'll talk more about that, but we're now commercial stage, and we do have a platform technology looking at additional movement disorder indications, other neurologic indications, and then broader targets as well.
Awesome. That's good. Hi, my name is Raja Sundaram. I'm the CEO of Fitbit. We focus on musculoskeletal care, both at healthcare and workers' comp. So think your ankle, knee, hip, lower back, shoulder, elbow, wrist. How do we enable patients to manage their own care at home between clinic visits? Much has been talked about hybrid care. We enable hybrid care. So enable the clinicians to extend care beyond the clinic into the home. We are an FDA Class 2 device. My journey has nothing to do with wearables. I came out of Cisco Systems. I'm a double E major, MBA Berkeley. Came out of Cisco Systems running digitalization solutions to Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs and everybody else in other industries. And then joined Richard Branson at Hyperloop One, and then did strategy consulting for Boston. I read something about mobility as a problem as we grow older, living longer, and the aging population. I thought I should help. So I quit my job and convinced a whole lot of people to quit their jobs. That's really how we got about it. But my focus really is, yes, we do have a sensor, a wearable sensor. Our focus really has been, how do you get human beings to use it? Because if you build it, they won't come. I'm certain many of you have bought Fitbits or Apple Watch, and I'm going to ask that. Right. So our emphasis has been about easy to wear form factors, which requires 6 years of going through iterations on making it wearable, particularly men who don't recharge products. And that's going on. And then the next question is, we're asking people to do exercises, which is very hard to get a human being to do twice a day. And so the focus has been a combination of behavioral psychology and wearables to drive behavior. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's a beautiful space.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, we have an all-star panel. Much has been said about this, much has been publicized about this. I think we're going to be very excited with what we have to share today. I'm going to start off with just piggybacking on what Raja said, transitioning from the Fitbit, right? Wearables have evolved from simple accessories, I hope that's a good word for you, Raja, to real-time non-invasive biosensors, right? So we have BioWearables that enable continuous monitoring, provides information to determine health status, maybe even preliminary medical diagnosis, right? So in your opinion, what is next for the field? And what major trends are shaping this future for the field? Yeah?
See, there are two parts to it. The first is, in my mind, the wearable technology. Well, three parts. The first is the wearable technology, which, I really like some of the technology coming out from certain one of you working on it, which is the suit-based, flexible, easy to use, or the tattoo-based, whether it's a clothes or something that you're wearing. That becomes very important in terms of ease of use. That's the key. Because if you build it simple, then you use it. The second part of it that I see alongside is getting to some level of accuracy. I was at the health conference in Las Vegas.
Oh my God, I was just there. I walked 18 miles over 3
We are UCSF digital award, right? So I had to show up. Look, it has to have efficacy. Every single panel there was talking about how cardiothoracic cardiovascular surgeons are really tired that everyone shows up in their clinic saying, I have AFib, but they don't have nothing, right? And so it has to get into some kind of efficacy. And the third point that's going to be important is, this is great, if you build it, they will come, but the economics model, someone has to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? So whether you do a B2B or B2B2C or B2B to whatever models, someone has to pay for it. So what's the economic model to go make that happen? So a combination of where I see this go is, whether it's the folks who are doing fantastic work, non-device based, is here, sleep therapy, I think I snore, now I'm going to know whether I do, to therefore what am I going to do with it, is as a CEO working 7 days a week, then how am I taking care of myself and what's a reminder, whatever the use case is, that along with actual data that is relevant to me and what I'm going to do with it, big data analytics, and the economics behind it is how I see this moving forward. And there's fantastic technologies that I've either seen used or have others implanted under their skin. I'm looking forward. Thank you.
I agree with a lot of what you were saying, Rhonda, in terms of what I see a lot of personally where I am is we have a lot of new data, new sensing techniques coming together. The gap that is often missing is, like you said, the human factors. How do you make it comfortable for a human to wear? How do you get it into an environment where it's actually applicable? For one project we were looking at the gas content in a confined space. So basically one of the unfortunate secrets of air travel is that they periodically have to tear the planes apart and someone has to crawl into the fuel tank and scrub it out. And since fuel's been in there and they're spraying hard solvents, it's a very hostile environment. And so to make sure they're safe, they take a sensor, they put it by the door, they measure once, and then they're okay for the ship, which in reality is anything but. So the question is, how do we get something where it's comfortable enough that they can take it in there? It's not going to get knocked off the second they try and crawl through a hole about that big, or it's so unwieldy that they just leave it sitting in their locker at the beginning of the shift. I think the final thing is like you're saying, okay, now we have the data, what does it mean? What do we do with it? How is it actionable? And in the case there, you can, instead of having someone standing there looking at the person for the entire shift and see when, unfortunately not if they pass out, instead you can actually monitor their vital signs and hopefully have emergency personnel there in a timely fashion instead of having a very painful extraction process.
I actually have a contrarian view, maybe because we're in therapy, but we have just published a real-world evidence study of our first 2 years of patients. We have thousands of patients with our devices. On average, after 2 years of use, they're still using it 5 times a week. So if you deliver a benefit, they will come. So we actually deliver a therapy. We treat a condition called essential tremor. It's a hand tremor, so the name of the bothersome symptom. And we're able to actually resolve tremor for patients. We're not curing the disease by any means. We're actually giving them the ability to restore activities of daily living. They can feed themselves, they can dress themselves, they can brush their teeth without making a mess. And so I actually think the future is that closed loop therapy module, because I myself have 6 Fitbits in my nightstand drawer, because I know how to measure my steps now with my phone, right? I don't need something to tell me more information. I need something to help me in my daily life. Sorry to be controversial.
No.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not controversial. Here's what we've learned. What we've learned is, it's one thing to have a chronic condition. Let's just take that as an example. There, if your blood sugar is low, something bad is going to happen to you. The problem that we face in acute is, if someone has a frozen shoulder and they really don't do everything that they need to do, they don't see an immediate effect. It's 18 months from now they get the next frozen shoulder. So it's not like they're losing their range of motion that they can't walk tomorrow. So how do you tell Johnny or Susie, look, if you don't do this 18 months from now, you're going to have a frozen shoulder? That's kind of where we find in chronic and acute, where someone wearing, one of the devices that's there on continuous monitoring literally say, hey, versus trying to convince Johnny that he has to get up and do this on his son. That's kind of what we've learned that there's a struggle. People are like, wait a second, I can walk. It's not my knee replacement. Yeah, but you're losing your range of motion. And the range of motion is like this novel concept that people go, what on earth does that mean, right? And so that's kind of what we find. It's a learning for us on acute of trying to convince people.
And we also just opened up in June of this year a patient portal to begin to actually, we're even an IoT connected device since we launched it in September 19. And patients knew we had their data. I mean, clearly we're measuring it. They're doing pre and post tasks. And so only now do we have that ability to feed back to the patients themselves the data and how they're performing. When we launched, we only had a cash pay option. Today we have many more options for affordability and access. But we had an early patient call us up and say, my doctor told me I was going to get 50% tremor reduction, and I'm only getting 30%. We go look at her data. She had like 90% tremor reduction. She was like rock solid. But because it is such a burden of a cash pay out of pocket, we have a trial period where we give the money back and all that's fine. We had to take her device back and return it, even though she was like a stellar responder. So early learnings for sure.
The challenge being in an old staff panel is all the points I've made before you. No, this was excellent. These were really important points. And I mean, definitely making the devices more comfortable and the performance of the device basically better are very important advancements that we're looking after. And especially, I mean, Raja mentioned the tattoo or electronic skin type of technologies becoming the maybe next generation wearable technologies. One thing that I might want to add I know this from personal experience, and maybe that is one of the problems with many Fitbit devices or many smart devices that you have used but never continue to use them for a really long time is, for example, I'm lazy, right? I'm lazy. And my problem was with the Fitbit. I bought it, and I was really excited about it. I'm working on wearables. I used to show it in my classes. I give it an example. I quit using it. The reason is basically I don't like to charge it every day. So right now, I'm using this. It's a solar-powered watch. I don't touch it. I don't do anything with it, right? It's just doing everything itself. It's just receiving, it's just correcting itself through satellite, right? So that's what I like. Technologies that are solving problems of power consumption is, I think, one of the important aspects of the wearables, right? We need to look for technology that doesn't require power. Renee's and her technology is in a big position, right? Continued usage is, to me, is a less of a problem. I always thought that because you're giving direct benefit to the user. They're literally seeing it.
They're seeing the tremor.
Do they stop using your technology?
They use it 5 times a week after 2 years.
Yeah.
No, they don't stop using it. That's the beauty.
Yeah. So that needs to be an immediate clinical benefit. For example, I said I'm lazy, but I have musculoskeletal problems. I continue doing those exercises every day, half an hour. I'm not that lazy, right? Because I see the benefit immediately. If I don't do it, I have my shoulder pain or back pain, etc. So the yoga must be done. So you do it, right? You do it. So clinically relevant data and clinically proven benefits are really, really critical in the next generation of wearables. And here, I think one thing needs to be considered, and it is who is the customer? Right? The customer is, of course, the patient, but also the physician. Right? So the data, especially for a continuous monitoring device, and the payer. So they need to be informed, they need to be consulted, we need to understand what they need.
You did have a good point, though. Power is the constant thorn in every wearable side, especially when you try and make it flexible. So,
We solve that because our patients know that when they charge the device at night, that is how today, in our current form factor, we're actually transmitting all of the data and usage of therapy over to our cloud. So I would say we were lucky rather than we designed this, but we purposely started without a patient portal or any ability to show a patient the data. We wanted to make sure it was super simple and not overwhelming. Our data scientists have more data than we could possibly imagine, and we knew we couldn't share that just widely with them. So it took us a while. It took us 18 months to be able to figure out how to simply show data to patients that was empowering and encouraging them to continue usage. And we now see it working. In fact, 35% of our patients are working in the data.
We'll just transition directly sort of to your field of expertise or what you're focused on, which is we know wearables can affect a large user base, right, and it can impact different set of communities. But your focus has been on how wearables can play a role in improving the situation for elderly and chronic. So I wonder if you could spend a bit more time talking about the role of wearable technologies, at least in your opinion, in transforming the standard of care for elderly and chronic patients.
We're working in an elderly patient population. Typically, our patients are diagnosed with essential tremor in their mid-40s. They're often given the first-line drugs, which are propranolol and primidone. They're not on label for essential tremor care. It's an anti-epileptic seizure medication and a beta blocker for cardiovascular disease. And in order to actually generate benefit in the essential tremor has tremor of the hands, tremor of the voice, and the face. But the most bothersome symptom is the hand, because they can't feed themselves and do what they do. So they don't like the drugs. I mean, they'll say, yeah, my tremor stopped, but I was asleep, so what does it matter? Right? And so by the time they're getting a prescription, about 70% of our patients are over the age of 65. So they're clearly in the Medicare age. And we are shipping a box and device directly to the patient's home. So it had to be super simple, very, very intuitive in terms of how you attach the stimulator to the band. Our band actually houses our dry electrode material, which is proprietary to us. And they have a large button that they press, and they can get started and be successful from the get-go. So all of that was really designed up front. We even, within our first 30 days of launching the product, we actually pushed out a firmware over the air to extend our battery life. So now when we ship a box to a patient, we put it into a sleep mode, and that battery life lasts for at least 10 days. So if a patient doesn't open their box right away, maybe on day 7 or 8, they can still be successful with that delivery. And so that's been really impactful for us, is to give success to those patients. Because the last thing you want to do is have them start to plug in the device, recharge it, and go through all that hassle to get started with the therapy.
Thank you. A lot of what you talked about, you're really talking about how you can deliver devices for sort of at-home care, right? So I think that's what I want to transition into, is BioWearables really have this ability to decentralize healthcare, right? And create a shared language between the patients, doctors, and the caregivers. And maybe even, as you mentioned, put patients at control of their own health, right? So given this, Raja, do you want to spend some time talking about your vision around Pleti, right? And how do you see BioWearables revolutionizing at-home healthcare?
So it's very much in line with what you said. Look, if it is about something, I'm just going to use musculoskeletal as an example. They go see a doctor, the primary care, who sends them to an orthopod or a spine surgeon, who says you need a new knee or you have arthritis, whatever the case is, and then gives them 6 sheets of paper, maybe a PD prescription, which they go once a day, once a week. People have access to care issues like you. 70% of our patients are 65 to 94 years old. And in workers' comp, our patients are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 is great, but they're all agricultural workers. They're all retail workers. They're all manufacturing workers. They're machinery, oil and natural gas, and everything else. Who gets injured? It's the lunch lady in the cafeteria at Santa Clara U, not that person, right? And so that's access to care. They're 45 minutes away. They have anxiety because their wages are now in trouble and they are in pain. Let's get real about who we are trying to address. The challenge then is, how do you empower them? How do you empower them is, first you have to figure out a mechanism to keep them engaged, for them to understand why this is important. You can give them a device. And look, we talked about chronic condition. Part of our journey has been and I don't want to quote the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on which it's centered around, but it is. It is the men don't charge. We talked about it. I said that before, the Fitbit problem. And so there is no recharging. Battery lasts 6 months. Your power optimized. Because of tremor, there is no on button. You press it's a small disc that you wear near any joint of the body when you have a problem. You press anywhere it turns on. There is no off button. Because putting a button doesn't work at a certain age. But that's not it. It's not the technology. What we did along with it is our app is, we did biopsychosocial. Our app is psycholinguistic written. We profile every patient. So we not only have data on height, weight, ethnicity, BMI, and everything else, we know ethnicity, we know recovery rates. If you're black, brown, blue, gray, yellow, whatever the color is, and along with comorbidity. We also understand how you want to learn. Adult learning theory, some people listen to people because their doctor said so, and some people will not listen to people because their doctor said so. How do you engage them, right? So how do you figure out what they are and how do you engage them? So we have coaches. And we found the reason why we have coaches, and I'm going to go back to our topic at hand. We have coaches because we found that most of the elderly live alone. Their kids are in Boston or in San Francisco, and they're living in Iowa.
They want to talk to some human being. We don't have coaches because we're suddenly coaching them. We're coaching them because they want to talk to somebody else who they believe cares about them, is empathetic about them. That's why we create coaches. It helps us in the work of Scrum. So when you start thinking about the audience, then you start thinking about the right product line and what it looks like. We used to have a perfect disc. It's got a notch because we found elderly walking around their bed looking for the sensor when they dropped it. They have a bum knee, we don't want them on their knees looking for a sensor. So it's been generations of these. How do you build things? Women. I don't want to wear something that looks like a sticker when I go to church in summer in Sacramento. Okay, throw that away and you design again, right? It's human-centric design and simple to understand. You want people to use it. So some of the technologies, back to the point that you're making, make it seamless. And some of what I've seen at CES and so on are just fabulous because they're not non-obtrusive. They are easy, they're chargeable in a very simple way or not, but it's solar charging or movement-based charging. Hallelujah. Why? Because the last point is if one have the data, then intervention is quicker. Look, it's about understanding when Johnny or Susie is just on the recovery trajectory for the height, weight, BMI, ethnicity, and whatever dimensions you on the biodimensions. In addition to that, you also need to understand when intervention needs to be done. Because if you intervene quicker, faster, Johnny and Susie get better, and the health system reduces cost attainment, which is because it's overblown. And so how do you balance these two in real time, be able to intervene? And that's, I'm certainly going to talk about the power of data, but the trick is really engage human beings in what they do, because this virtual care, hybrid care model is what's going to happen. Much of the conversation last week was, look, there aren't going to be much OBGYNs in the future. There aren't a lot of orthopedic surgeons in the future. We have a shortage of primary care providers, in case you folks don't know it. And by the way, the nurses are, either people like us are hiring these nurses, left, right, and center, let's call it what it is, or they are striking. Okay, so I don't want to grow old in this country. I mean, I'm just joking, but, you know, I'm here. But that, we don't have a shortage problem. And particularly now, start thinking about Enloe Hospital, way up there. Which surgeon wants to go to Enloe Hospital? So access to care for folks who are in the lower end of the spectrum, the social spectrum, is just going to get worse. We already see it when you're in Grass Valley, Sacramento, versus downtown Sacramento with 15 hospitals every stone throw away. There's a huge difference in access to care. Those are the societal problems we are all trying to solve. So going back to the BioWearables, the more I know at home remotely, the better I can intervene, either directly or virtually, and that's going to be the trick. Sorry, long response, short question.
Thank you, Raja. And I will shift focus a little bit. It seems like we've been bashing on Fitbit quite a bit today. But you know, your work with wearable movement sensing and intraocular pressure monitoring, they all focus on developing devices for healthcare, right? So beyond simply saying that you're providing sophisticated measurements beyond Fitbit, how are your devices different, right? And what design features are of particular interest and relevance to your work?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, I mean, when Raja was explaining the product and their application, I'm really excited about it because we're currently trying to develop devices with the same mindset, new type of devices. But our vision is a little bit beyond that, right? And I want to explain a little bit our vision. So we have our capillary system, right? Internal capillary system, and of course it's vital to say what our technology is relying on capillaries, but as an external skin. Right? And we're making devices where movement is driving the fluid movements, basically. Okay? And using unique fluidic physics principles, we're trying to develop devices that can sense movements. That's one aspect of it. But it's really beyond that, right? If you think about it, you can use capillary technologies for drug delivery. Or another aspect, and we can have closed loop systems, going back to one of the original points, one of the points that was made earlier. And also, if you think about it, Raja mentioned about movements generating power, for example. Right? So, I mean, there are some technologies where you generate power to drive liquid movement. So we're basically, we have mechanical effects driving liquid movements directly. We're basically eliminating the intermediary step where you get human movement converted to electrical signals or electrical power, and then converting into liquid displacement, liquid movement for delivering drugs, for example. So we're interested in how human movements can drive liquid movements, and we're thinking about how we can use this for sensing applications as well as for delivery applications, for example. In that sense, as a wearable microfluidic device, and controlling the fluidic movements on the body in an external device, our approach is unique. There is, of course, technologies which use microfluidics for sweat sensing. So that is a growing, one of the, related to the earlier question, sweat sensing is one of the technologies in wearable devices that is very interesting. I think it should be mentioned. But in the sense that we're using the human movements for controlling the liquid movements, our approach is unique.
Cool, thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit. So you've all heard about different types of technologies, different exciting developments that are made in developing biosensors, right, or BioWearables. In the end, this all has to be accessible for the community, right? So that brings me to the question I have for you, Alex. We have developed a wide range of BioWearables, right? And often the technique that drives the design and prototyping or testing of these BioWearables have been rapid prototyping. But are we ready for the next stage? Are we ready to move from rapid prototyping to rapid manufacturing? And has rapid manufacturing come to a level where we can create a large number of BioWearables, enough number of BioWearables where different communities can really gain from it, especially those who are below or at poverty line, right? How do people from lower economic standards benefit from this exciting technology?
Yes, it's a great question. To get into the rapid side of things, as Raja mentioned, you have you drop the device, it rolls under the table, and all of a sudden you have a redesign on your hands. Being able to turn around and generate prototypes, generate new designs is very critical, and it does have an impact on the underlying cost, because if it takes you $10 billion to get your device to market and it's serving 100 people, economically speaking, that's going to be a really hard sell. But if you can get your device to market much quicker, you can get something a little bit easier, that's going to help you out a lot. It's a kind of an interesting thing to be in this particular space as well, because as you all probably saw, we have the makerspace over there with a lot of 3D printers. And that's something that we are actually seeing influence the field, where people are being able to print electronics, sometimes on systems very much like that, where instead of putting down plastic, you're putting down a conductive metal, you're putting down some sort of biological. And this is very valuable for both the academic and the research world, because again, try something out, fail fast, and move on to something that works better. But we're also finding out that there's sometimes some interesting, I would say, advantages besides just being faster. And cost is certainly a big one of those. Instead of putting all of your electronics on a circuit board where you have 2 layers or 16 layers of copper, and you're just removing 99% of your copper, stage by stage. Instead, you're just putting your metal where you want it, you're putting your dielectric where you want it, you're putting your biologicals where you want it. The final aspect of it, which I think is really critical, again, for cost and making it accessible, is being able to do things on flexible plastic substrates, but also, biomaterials like even papers or things which are biodegradable, because you inherently have a lot of these biowearables where you have one part of it which is disposable. So you might have a sensor strip which one use, throw it away, but you keep the more expensive part of it. Being able to provide that one use part of it more cheaply, more responsibly, and also being able to do it in a way where it's not going to pile up for the next 10,000 years, I think is a very attractive thing which motivates us.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I would like to try and combine my last 2 questions. In all of the panels that I moderate, I always like to ask questions around what is the role of collaboration, and then what is it there for developing the next generation workforce. So I'll try and combine these questions and ask. It's evident with the audience right now that based on all the things that have been in development, in delivery, in commercialization, that multiple disciplines are coming together, right? So what does this pair in terms of informing the next generation workforce? Given that there's this great new brand new building in the middle of Silicon Valley in an academic institution, how does higher education play a role in creating the next generation workforce, and how does industry play a role in helping academia or higher education in building that next generation workforce?
So, I'll just start that. From our standpoint, one of the big things that NextFlex is very interested in is making a workforce here in the U.S. We don't want to be sending all of our designs overseas to be manufactured. And a big part of that is having the people with the expertise to do it here. And thus, it's kind of always the chicken and the egg problem of, do you have the technology, do you have the market drive to drive it? But kind of on the interdisciplinary side, we've heard all, night that a big part of it is the human factors. So you might think of the electronics as, I need a double E, I need an ME, but you need someone who is able to look at it from the perspective of, what do I actually have to do to get someone to pick this thing up and to use it day after day? Or alternatively, how do we communicate that data more effectively? So I think it's a huge, benefit or need for higher education, because while you certainly see a lot of your technicians coming through with maybe an associate's degree, you really do need to have the engineers, the sociologists, the communications experts, and the human factors experts to really make things, I would say, function properly.
I'll pick up on that. This is where it happens. There are 2 choices. Either it happens here at Santa Clara U, or I go put a job description out at one of the sites and try to find somebody who fits this. Here's why. Because to the point that you were making, anything that you do requires some kind of computer science, some big data analytics, some mechanical engineering, some electrical engineering, some form factor and design of whatever sort. And you require people who can write English in the way people understand, linguists of some sort. And you need someone who has to figure out how the economics works on ROI, so we can all go to Blue Cross Blue Shield and say what a fabulous thing this is. So which means the Leakey School of Business, right? And so I can either go into the market in Los Gatos or Palo Alto here in San Jose and go attempt to get these folks, or the journey starts here with people who are eating lunch. Now what the institutions can do is just to take, I used to guest lecture at Leakey School of Business,
is we've always done these, or the engineering schools on blah blah will always work on something. This cross-pollination across fields. We have a psycholinguist on staff, for Christ's sake, right? And so the ability to turn around and look at these multiple disciplines to understand what it takes to, and it's different in, class 3 medical device to solving bigger problems than getting a human being to do an exercise problem, right? And you start looking at it that way, then you start understanding that these are cross-functional projects. This is where it starts. And by the way, without that education, going back to I'm perfectly fine in certain roles with regards to not having, I would say a college degree kind of stuff, but there has to be a specialized level of education. Even if you're not going to a college, or if you're going to a college, there needs to be some speciality in what you do. I can't do underwater basketball.
I think there's also the cultural element. So one of the things, yes, we have all of it. We have data engineers, data scientists, and PhD neuroscientists, putting electricity into the brain. So very, very complex. But at the core of what is successful for us as an employer, and we're only 130 people, we're not going to move the needle here in Silicon Valley with the hundreds of thousands of employees that are employed by the tech industry. But to us, there's a level of just sheer curiosity. I go back to my foundings. I was an economics major. I drew graphs. I went into investment banking so I could learn. And all I've ever done successfully in my career is learn. And so if you come with that mindset of, we're going to solve things that haven't been solved before. We're going to fail. There are failures. There are scabs on our knees. That mentality really works for us. The master of whatever topic doesn't work for us as an employer, right? Because we ourselves are still asking the questions. We're the first company to go out and commercialize a wearable neuromodulation therapy. So if we think we know it all, I can promise you we surpass by many, many competitors. So we really have to be out there learning from our customers, learning from our patients. We have an on-site clinic. We see patients every day. We bring in elderly patients, Parkinson's patients, and they interface with our devices. And so you can talk about having a human factors engineer and blah, blah, blah. We just do it. We just get out there and pull these patients in and do it.
So, when I hear your question about the workforce, right, I'm not in a position to answer that question because I'm not in the hiring position, right? You're raising students, you're educating. So when I hear that question, I understand it as, what is your responsibility, and how do you see yourself in educating next generation of engineers, scientists? So, and when I think about the answer to this question, I go back and think about a very important aspect in personal development, where instant gratification is one of the main obstacles in front of personal development. And also, similarly, in career development, I think going after short-term gains is an important obstacle. So I think having long-term vision, going after projects, ideas that takes maybe not a few months, maybe a few years. Of course, we are bound by the funding that we have. We cannot, not everybody has the luxury. I totally understand this, but sacrificing from a few years of success, of reward, to achieve something big in 5-year time scale, in 10-year time scale, is, I think, our responsibility. I think the pandemic has affected everybody, every one of us. Some of the solid foundations that are required has been lost. I'm a little bit pessimistic, maybe. I'm a little bit worried about these aspects. So we need to rebuild, I think, the need for this type of vision, this type of solid ideas, solid products. So that's how I see my responsibilities in that regard.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I may not be the best moderator for this because I don't wear a wearable. I don't even wear a solar powered watch. I wear a using my hand. But I completely agree with the panelists, and perhaps the reason why I asked the question, and as a part of a lot of what we do, I mean, we try to bring multiple disciplines together in pursuit of a larger problem. And often, and Emre will agree with this, in many of our conversations we talk about how we should inspire our students to think of a larger problem as opposed to a specific discipline, right? And healthcare is a large enough problem where we all should be pooling our resources to think about how we pursue the solutions, right? So with that, I want to spend take some time to give the audience a chance to ask some questions of the panelists. But before then, I think it's high time that we give another round of applause for the panelists. So if there are any questions, I can pass on the mic.
So great conversation. I love the impact that you're doing around acute and chronic illness. What is the potential value of wearables in the high-end market for performance enhancement, for sports, defense, and the impact that might have?
Can I go? Okay. We are attempting to, we are negotiating with the NFL, and we are doing some pilot with BYU, very early days on how right and all about. Here's what I've learned two things, and then I'll go into the different. So in the performance sports, there is two aspects that seems to be very critical. One is sleep quality. Okay, and I know the gentleman in the back is working on it. If you want to talk about it. The second piece of the second one is just performance at the top. Can I jump so much? Can I run that fast and everything? So we see those two. Now let's take them right. This variable becomes that much more critical because let's take extreme end of the spectrum just to make a point. Special forces. You're jumping off a chopper to raging sea, and you have to swim 20 miles to go, and you're carrying 60 pounds. Your usual suspects, which I've only seen in movies, but I'm going to assume it's real. What happens there is every single element of how you're breathing to what your body temperature is, and everything becomes that much more critical in performance, more than ever. The problem there is this, going back to the point you were making earlier. You can't carry a battery pack that does blah, 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 because these people are already carrying 60 pounds or whatever they carry, right? So it has to be the next generation of wearables that the professor was talking about becomes that much more important. So this is what I have learned. I can't solve sleep, but I can solve recovery, is kind of where we're talking to. Very early days with NFL, because that's what they care about.
The dollars are unlimited.
There's a lot of money to be had
You
there.
cannot, yes, so they'll spend whatever it takes to make the Navy SEAL times 10, right? So they can perform better. But that's not the real world. And so yes, some of those technologies eventually come into the healthcare space and make it to actual patients. But in that context, there's unlimited dollars, and it's not reality.
NASA, the military.
Yeah, go over to SRI, you see it all.
Yeah, see, what we used to use spot of it, we're going to say that. But on the pathway to it is also difficult. Because you have to go through the FedRAMP process for them to be able to do it. And no, I have not touched it, because everyone has warned me against it. So someday I will have it, right? I'm not good at it. We don't have competency for it. With regards to the money, this is interesting you say that. If you actually go into professional sports, companies that have gone into professional sports, you're talking about sweat bags. There's a company out in the peninsula somewhere that did this fantastic, and they were funded by the 49ers. and died. Right? My buddy was the CEO there. The problem is sports never pays. But the associated health infrastructure around sports plays. What I mean by that is, when you go into San Jose and you just do a Google search of shark doctors, everyone's like, I'm the primary care for the sharks, I'm an orthopedic for the sharks, I'm the neurologist. I'm a dentist for the sharks. Right. So you get into sharks, not to get into sharks or whatever, or earthquakes, but to get into the medical infrastructure surrounding the quakes or the sharks or whoever else. That's the money. That's what I've done. So it's not the teams. But military, oh yes. Bodies who will sleep for DOD and everything else. God bless them.
The military side, there's also the other side of not jumping out of the helicopter and, going through the desert, but the 8-hour shift of bleed board and interrupted by 15 seconds of absolute terror, and then 2 hours of what the heck just happened. And then you go home and to your family and just like nothing happened. So there's a lot of interest in cognitive monitoring, making sure people are in the right mind space so they can actually handle the workload. A commercial instance of that would be a long-range truck driver. The current solution is not great, but you want the person to be able to find out when they're getting drowsy, to be able to correct before the world corrects them.
Hi, thank you for this interesting topic. I'm thinking there is a potential large population of teenagers that they could use the bundle devices to help them. Because right now, after pandemic or even during before, because their cortex, their executive function is still developing, they are getting into one is the behavior and also anxiety, depression, with the school, and also the sleeping, and just all the one. So if there is a device that help them to regulate their routines and all those, that's going to be super helpful. Because they basically, with those phones, it's like 24/7. It's with the device. I haven't seen actual wearables, because I got teens at home, and a friend has teenagers, where I have a huge issue to get them.
I've seen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. We actually have a partnership with, we have a platform technology. So today I'm working on, the only thing I talk about is our median nerve stimulation. We actually have vagal nerve stimulation studies for ongoing with MGH and field compression. I will tell you the challenge has been, and I think I see waves of things changing, that the FDA made a proclamation a couple years ago that all things in the mental health field will be a PMA. We're a venture-backed company. I got to move fast. I went from founding a company to our first approval within 3 years. We're de novo 510K. So PMA is a much, much higher bar for a startup company to be successful. So it's not us that's the problem. I can do that, but it's the FDA right now that's the problem. I see waves of them looking at certain newer, there's a thing here called Magus Medical. It's technology out of Stanford called the same technology. It's taking magnetic stimulation and taking what used to be a 6-week, 8-week course of care down to 3 to 5 days. Super impactful. That movement was very interesting for us because that's a signal that they're going to move away from PMA. But a lot of companies have been on the sidelines in this whole absolute crisis of mental health. I have 2 teenagers myself. I feel your pain. I had it all through COVID. And if in fact the FDA does allow for non-significant risk devices to interface with young adults, we'll be first in line. So it's there. It hasn't been the companies who've been preventing it from developing. It's been the FDA.
So So there's pediatric ones though. I have a friend of mine, she's a CEO of a company that's FDA cleared on pediatric for ADHD as an example, right? It also has been found to help with other things. But I'm there with you. There's a pediatric, and then you have your own, apartment. You're not living in the basement of this gap with regards to age.
Drug-resistant depression, things like that.
Yeah.
Really, really serious cases have still been regulated too.
But even if you do that, go back to this week at health, it's multidisciplinary, which means there's going to be a virtual care of speaking to somebody, and there is sleep monitoring, and there is other things to go along with it from our behavior. I have a 11-year-old. Yeah, I'm there with it.
I'm going to put a student in the spot. So I didn't have to put anyone in the spot. We have a question for the student.
Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. Being a student who just came into bioengineering, it's very inspiring to see what we will be doing in the future and what the future holds for us and what is the field that we will be getting into. One question I have is, like in places like India, since I have come from India, not everything is very accessible, and I think you sort of addressed this earlier, but how can we reduce the cost and make these devices more accessible to more number of people, especially those who are very poor or couldn't afford these?
So one of the things that we're very interested in is how do you make devices in an efficient way, kind of at the end use. So you don't have a supply chain that crosses the world multiple times, but maybe you can print out a device, at home and actually put something together. It's certainly not there yet, but there's a lot of, I think, promising ventures in that direction that say that maybe soon. And of course, there's a lot of interest in it from other directions in terms of how do we, just print money in places like space or a desert or wherever. So there's definitely other drivers for that technology.
Can I comment on that? Because we did the Made in India, Made for India. So in Apollo and Hyderabad, just before COVID, and that put an end to that project. We did this for about 6 months, and then we would have these remote access in our villages and so on. Now, look, here's what I have now seen at this point. Made in India, Made for India, Made in Bangladesh, Made for Bangladesh, Made in Sub-Saharan Africa. So, right, that is really what is happening. So when you start looking at folks such as himself, to Flex, to everybody else in the marketplace, I'm just going to pick on India for a second. The entire stretch of Pune and others have now become manufacturing hubs, right? And so this notion of, we make our product in Malaysia, right? But if we were to shift it into India, as an example, as a medical device, you realize that there are very, very high quality FDA cleared sites in Coimbatore, in Tamil Nadu. So the ability to do regionally, to this point, you can't cross borders because the van will just kill us. So it has to be made in that place or that place, then you can create the access.
We'll take one last question. I guess that's coming from there.
Thank you so much for all your insights. I had a question for Dr. Rat and any of the other panelists as well. You mentioned that your company spent 18 months developing a system of patient feedback that's rewarding and leads to better outcomes for the patients. I was curious specifically what types of feedback ended up being more rewarding for the patients and led to those outcomes. And also, if it's an easier way to answer the question, maybe what ended up not being as helpful for the patients. And of course, if any of the other panelists have similar experiences, I'd love to hear those as well.
Just for me,
Oh, for Dr. Ryan.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I said 18 months. I don't know if we've done anything in 18 months in our one cycle. We give patients a therapeutic benefit. They literally put put our device on, and within 10 to 15 minutes, they have tremor relief. So our reward is a very visual and real benefit to these patients. So that delivering therapy works. That's why we continue to use it 5 to 6 times a week after 2 years of buying our device. And by the way, our real world evidence study is only on our cash pay patients, which our price is very high, and our VA patients. So we actually are treating a lot of deaths. So it's a really nice part of our business. So I don't know exactly where the 18 months came from. Have we tried other things? Well, we just opened up our patient portal to begin to show data to our patients. And we are seeing a really nice stickiness of people saying, oh my gosh, I'm really getting that much tremor benefit. And you're looking at kind of just improvement ratio. Very simple graphics of how much improvement I'm getting dose by dose. So time will tell as to what we're really able to reward patients with. I mean, we have all sorts of crazy ideas. But again, you have to meet your patients where they are. They're 70 years old on average. And so we're rewarded more by their ability to hold their grandchild or go to the park and play with their grandchild than they are by, Bitcoins in their Slack account or whatever they could possibly have.
So at this time, just to comment, so you're spot on. We found that gamification does not work. Okay? For 2 reasons. Number one, yes, my parents would play Candy Crush, but suddenly if I tell them that they are like, oh, only got 3 gold stars, our experience at least, it creates anxiety. So it's like, wait a second, I didn't get 5 stars, I only got 3, what the heck, what do I do? They immediately start calling their doctor. And the doctor goes like, dude, what are you doing today, right? So we learn. So part of our journey has been, I'm going to say, 3 years. For 3 years of seeing patients to the point you made, of being in their house, onboarding them, of seeing them in a clinic, onboarding them, seeing them search for their sensor under the bed, we have done that in order to get to it, or walked with them to grocery store and see how they feel about something in their shoulder, right? We've done those kinds of things. That has led us to. The flip side is, our data, from day one, we've always given patients their own data. Our philosophy as a company is, we don't own our data, their data, it's their own data, we're just the custodians of it. Right? That's kind of what our data policy is. So I'm not selling them Berkeley t-shirts, right? So what that means is this, we've always given them, but to the point is it has to be meaningful, and that's been the trick, which is, how do I show a doctor, an orthopod or a spine in our case, where the progression is of Johnny, and I'm telling the PT or the OT or the AT what the progression is, the nurse case manager the progression. And I've got to tell Johnny in a way that he understands if he's doing well, he's on the path to recovery, or he's not and he needs to up his game, right? And that part we've gotten good at it, we're constantly learning how to get just the right amount of data to each of these stakeholders who care about intervention.
And that's really important because in the field of rehab for orthopedic patients, common things like range of motion, pretty easy to understand. Does your knee go all the way out or does it only go like 70 degrees? That's super easy. We've had to develop our own. This is why we didn't display data to patients, is because we needed to, how do you explain tremor ratio improvement scores or whatever you use? I mean, like, it's not like it just rolls off your tongue and you talk about it at the dinner table, right? So we had to be super measured in how we brought patients along in their journey to understand the tremor benefit they were getting. We have, physician ratings and all these gold standard things that are used in a clinical setting, but once you take that to the home, you can't use that highfalutin language that a doctor uses. You have to be very simple.
All right. This has been a fantastic panel, and thank you again for spending time and educating our audience as to where the biowearable industry is going. We have another 10 or 15 minutes to mingle and ask more questions of the panelists. And at that time,